All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Parks and Recs Committee meeting. Today is January 17th, and yeah, I can't read the clock on my
6:58.
computer. Thank you. We're beginning this meeting at 6:56. My name is Tracy McGraw. I'm the chair of the committee.
Heather Fairbanks, Park and Rec Committee.
Phil Perzewski, committee member.
Maureen Hall, Senior Representative.
Josh Toms, committee member.
Matthew Brown, student representative.
And Matt Kasparis, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So we don't have a quorum tonight, so we're not going to be able to vote on the minutes. We needed 7 for a quorum.
We had 3
We-
drop out in the last hour, so we thought we were there, but it is what it is.
All right. So we're going to start with Merrimack Dog Park for old minutes. I don't have a lot of updates for myself. I have the usual requests from everybody. Please pick up after your pups. Your mother does not work there. Please also consider, now that we're in the snow season, to pick up the toys as you finish using them so that they're not getting buried underneath the snow when we find them in all disheveled conditions as the snow melts. And if your dog's digging holes, please fill the holes in. Please. Poop bags and holes. And Heather, do you have anything else? Because you are kind of more of a rep now from the Parks and Recs.
The only concern I have is if people are going to use the dog park and they have small dogs, to stay on the small dog side if their dogs aren't comfortable with bigger dogs. We had a situation where there was a group of bigger dogs in the small side, and someone new came to the park with a small dog, and they weren't really friendly to her. And she decided to leave. So
Okay.
I just remind people that to be considerate of others.
And that's actually a really good point that we've had. The dog cutoff, I think, is 30 pounds.
I think so.
Okay,
Sounds
so
right.
if your dog is under 30 pounds, consider just staying on the small dog side. If your dog is used to playing with big dogs, you really need to check and see what's on the large dog side. Your dog may like playing with big dogs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the big dogs on the large dog side want to play with your dog. And we want to avoid injury at all costs, both to the dogs as well as to the owners. So thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. All right. We're gonna move on. Looks like to
Me.
Matt.
Hey, it's me. It's the Matt Show. So I started saying before the meeting, we usually have this discussion about the budget back in October, November, but then because the budget came out to us so late this year, like I think I got it the day before our November meeting and hadn't written said budget yet. So we're going to kind of just skim through it a little bit, which will give me a little bit of practice for our budget presentation, which is tomorrow night at 6:30 over next door in the Matthew Thornton room. And, kind of just skim through the highlights. So our budget is broken into 2 sections, and this is kind of for the benefit of anybody listening at home. Any of you who are new, Matt, have you been on since this year, right? So you haven't been here a year ago. Okay. So our budget's split into 2 groups. It's the taxpayer side of the budget, and then what's called the recreation revolving side. The taxpayer funded side is a lot of things that we don't have a whole lot of control over. Utilities, electricity, natural gas, health insurance, fuel, those kinds of things. And a lot of those numbers get pre-filled in for me. And actually, as I'm saying this, let's pass this around.
Is it just one Oh, I
It's-
see it. Never
there's-
mind. Got it.
they're stapled together correctly.
Thank you.
And so on this side of the budget, there's not a whole lot of changes this year. The first one is this packet is making its way around. It relates to what's called part-time wages. This is overall, this budget item is basically staying level from what it was in the current year. But what we're doing is kind of shifting money around within the budget. But I talk about it, and I will be talking about it tomorrow, mostly just to so people understand why there's a change. So first off, in the current year, we had 2 park attendants. We discovered back during COVID, we really needed 2 people down there. One of the things the police told us when we were having a lot of those problems during COVID was, unless we can ask every single person down there whether they're a resident or not, we can't ask anybody. And it's basically like, because there's this appearance of like racial profiling essentially. And so you have to basically guarantee. And with one person, which we used to have going back 6, 7, 8 years ago, we couldn't do that because there's too many ways to get down to the beach area from up above. And so we switched to going back several years ago. What we're trying to do this year, and we've tried to do this a couple of times over the years, is to bring back weekend lifeguard coverage. We haven't had it in probably 15 years. And so we'd still have one park attendant kind of up above in that waterfront resident only parking lot. And then we would have the guards down on the beach guarding the water. We got funding actually, ironically, in 2020. And then when everything shut down, we never hired anybody because the town laid everybody off, all the seasonal staff off. It's taken us a couple of years. We finally built up a pretty good crew of lifeguards this last year. And so my hope is we'll be able to get the lifeguards we need to be able to deploy lifeguards on weekend and provide that safety aspect of things. So it's just kind of it'll end up being 3 lifeguards paired off, but you're taking away 1 park attendant, which isn't necessarily an even balance, but there's some other changes within this category that we're looking at. So, we went within this category as our part-time maintainer. It's a year-round position. It was 25 hours a week, and the person that was in this role up through March of last year, or February of last year. So it's been almost a year. He retired to take care of ailing parents and, whatnot. He was retired from the workforce anyway. And we kind of had no help through the spring, and then I got summer help, and then the position was vacant basically from August until 2 weeks ago. And what we learned in that 5 months of no maintenance help was somebody that's newly retired, which is generally what we're kind of looking for, because they have to be able to work kind of weekdays when we're there, because I can't give somebody maintenance tasks like using saws and climbing ladders when nobody else is around for safety aspects. And so, but what we learned was that somebody that's newly retired doesn't want to work 25 hours a week, And so we're scaling back that maintainer position to 15 hours, which we've got somebody in there, like I said, right now. But then what we're doing is adding in the seasonal park maintainer. This is a summer kid that we bring in for the summer. In the past, this is paid out of the camp. The campus paid for this position. Now it's going to get paid out of kind of the taxpayer funded. So like I said, we're kind of moving things around a little bit, but it saves it in the overall category. The money is basically an even swap. As far as the taxpayers are concerned, we're getting more services for the same amount of money, essentially. And then, our budget actually decreases by $406 compared to the current year. But it's a little different, And then most of the other changes within this account, like overtime goes up a couple $100. We end up having to recruit staff to come help us on 4th of July for the parade, is because as much as we like to get all volunteers, it just never happens. And so I usually end up bringing in 10 or 15 of my staff, which is time and a half, because it's a holiday, to work, just because I need that number of body. I need 15 or 20 people to run the parade. So that's going up a little bit just because cost of salaries and things have gone up. The jumping all the way down to the end, which is 01138374, which is recreation programs. And what this category is essentially the special events that we run in town. So summer concerts, Halloween, the holiday parade, winter carnival, Easter, so forth. This particular line item, again, is staying the same as it has been. But one of the things we've been doing for the last 7 years is our movies in the park. And, going back to, 6 and 7 years ago, we used to get, 150, 200 people a night at those movies. This year we were averaging 45, and it kind of doesn't feel very worth it, which meant that, 3 movies that with an average of 45. So we had one at 25, one at 45, and one at 65. So it's kind of like, it just doesn't feel like it for the effort. But what we're doing is reallocating that money that we used to get from the taxpayers for movies, which our movies in park were partially paid by taxpayers and partially funded by sponsorships from the Lions Club. So we're taking the taxpayer side of that money, and we're going to shift it into our summer concerts. And the reason we're doing that is, our concert line item has stayed the same for probably 7 years now. And, we used to balance out, $1,000 and $1,200 bands with, $300 and $400 bands. Well, there's only so many $300 or $400 bands that are actually any good. We find that on a night when we've got our, $1,000 band performing, we might see 250 or 300 people. And on a night when we have our $400 band playing, we might see 70 people. And so we're shifting some of that money over so that we can bring in some better quality music. We're up to, 9 concerts again this year. And, this year alone, we were at 200 people a night. And I would expect that with the better quality lineup that, be 250, 300, for an average. So, and actually it's 10 concerts this year only because the July 3rd concert that we always do with the Concert Association happens to fall on a Wednesday this year. So it'll kind of fit right into the series. And so the last thing that's kind of on the taxpayer side is infrastructure. And as we've talked over the last few months, I initially submitted 6 projects this year for capital improvements, 3 that didn't get funded last year, plus 3 new ones. And we only got 1 as far as, that's been approved up to this point, which is our beach project. And back when we did the initial phase 1 of the beach renovation project, which was in 2022, we were specifically dealing with the right-hand side of the beach. So the kind of to the right-hand side of those 3 big pine trees in there that are in the middle of the beach. And on the screen, you'll see kind of that. Here's the back side of the beach versus looking at it from the water side. If you remember what it looked like before, it obviously has been completely transformed, and obviously well received. We solved a lot of the erosion problems that we were dealing with, but what we get is a lot of jealousy related to the other side of the beach. When camp is in session, we usually will contain the campers within the right-hand side of the beach, within the swimming docks, because for easier monitoring and whatever. And when we get general public that comes down when camp's running, middle of the day, which isn't a lot of people, but we usually ask them to use the left-hand side of the beach, the outside, and they don't always like that very much. As you can see, look at the picture, you can kind of wonder why. As I said, those 3 big pine trees that are in the picture there, the state will not allow us to use them because it's kind of stabilizing the bank, but it obviously creates its own problems, which is what we dealt with on the other side initially. And so what we're looking to do is basically duplicate what we did on the right-hand side of the beach 2 years ago here on the left, and with kind of the same perched beach structure. But in this case, what we're going to do here is we're going to build in ADA access, and I forgot my little pointer thing. But basically, so here's those big pine trees. Here's the completed phase that we did. Here's the new phase, again, same retaining wall around the back. This canoe rack that's here that our camp canoes store in is going to get moved, and our ADA access is going to basically come in through the side here, which will make it basically a flat, smooth transition down to the water, so we're no longer dealing with this. The challenge we have is that with the state of New Hampshire, we have a permit for shorelands protection permit. Our permit was good for 5 years, and it expires in March of 2020. 2025. So we've got a year. So if we don't fund it this year, we lose our permit. And so not only do we lose our permit, is we have to start over. The permit alone is $5,000. Now this is a $100,000 project. There's $5,000. Dawn Tuamala and her team in DPW have to redo all the paperwork, which took us, when we got the original permit, it took us 9 months to do it. Now part of that was because of COVID and all that, but DPW's swamped beyond swamped anyway, and say, okay, here you go, you got to do it again, and then we go through all the submittals and all the meetings and so, while it maybe the permit fee is $5,000, so there's, now we take it to a 105, but say it's a year or 2 years or 3 years before this gets funded, now it's going to be 120, 130, 140, and again, we still have our ADA access issues. So this is why we're pushing for it for this year, because we're out of time. We tried to, wanted to do it last year. Obviously it got pushed back, now we're pushing it back, we're pushing for it again this year. As I've said to some of you before we started the meeting tonight, the council seems to have some concerns about the budget this year, just across the board. Tax rate looking to go up more than it usually does. So I have some fears about whether this is going to get funded this year. I guess we'll find out tomorrow when I present the budget to the council. But before we get to kind of the program inside of the budget, does anybody have any questions? Like I said, I kind of did this in a quick skim. But yes.
Marie?
I just thought, like in my backyard, when we have all those roots, we just fill them in with more dirt and made like a bed.
Yeah, you can't. No, you can't. The state says you can put 5 yards. 10 yards once every 5 years. Well, 10 yards doesn't cover that to any safe depth, and it would wash away in a season anyway. And you can only do it once every 5 years or 6 years. So, unfortunately, that's not really an option. I keep waiting for the pine trees to fall myself. Introduce beaver population. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, okay. So on Maureen's thought process, sorry, please excuse that. On Maureen's thought process on that, is there a way to build some kind of a barrier so that the sand wouldn't get underneath the barrier, or dirt, and then you could fill it in? It will definitely improve the appearance, because right now the only thing that
Right.
would cause a bigger problem would be dynamite.
Yeah. Well, and that was part of the argument we made with the state 4 years ago when we were trying to take out the trees in the first place. Was it's a trip and a safety hazard, and it's like, nope, can't take it out. So
That
but
tree is not going to go anywhere. It's going to outlive us all.
probably, and like I said,
More
that
power
amount
to
of
you.
dirt isn't going to do much of anything.
Well, if
Unfortunately,
you had it blocked off, what I'm saying is I get the 10 of 5 yards, 10 yards, whatever
I
it
can't
was.
remember what it is off the top
If
of my
you
head,
have it
but-
blocked off so it's not contributing to the sand that's in the lake, because wasn't that the issue, that they couldn't mix the sand from the outside to the sand in the inside of the lake?
No, it's just it's a total yardage is all you can add, basically. So
The things they choose to count.
yeah,
count.
it's funny. It really is. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot. We don't know what the council's going to do. So again, we looking at the bigger picture. We'll present this all tomorrow to the council, and like I said, on the taxpayer side, there's not a whole. I skipped a lot of things because there's not a whole lot of changes in there, because it's a lot of utilities and things. And so really this is the big project. But again, we'll present tomorrow. Then on actually next, I think we're the last department to go, is tomorrow. So next Wednesday, they'll do kind of their final review of budgets. And then they'll start making decisions about if they need to make cuts, and then they'll decide what they're going to move to the warrant article for February for the public hearing.
So what I saw the agenda that came from Becky for tomorrow. It looks like we're listed third.
Yep.
Okay, so
I'm
what would
guessing
be the-
I'm guessing 7 o'clock. Welfare is usually pretty quick. They'll have questions about homelessness in the area and rates of services and things like that. Library's usually pretty quick. So I'm guessing 7:15 is when I'll get up there. So
Do you think there's any benefit to having a good showing from the committee?
if you can, it certainly can't hurt. It just, I don't know which way the wind's gonna blow. I'll know a little bit more. So, like I said, DPW is over there right now talking. And one of the things we talked about in the department heads meeting this morning was to have, Dawn's gonna kind of tee up the beach project, because it's gonna be her having to do the work if they re-up it. So she's gonna kind of preface it and going, and by the way, looking ahead to other capital projects, this is one of them, and this is a big one, and this is what it's going to cost. So she's going to kind of try to soften the blow a little bit, and hopefully we'll get them to keep it. But
So
we'll
is this,
see.
would this be the third time if we can't get the beach project done before March of 2025? Will this be the third time that DPW has to do the paperwork, or the second?
Technically the second, because we were within it was a 5-year permit for. Huh?
My brain's going.
You-
I'm thinking of the deck. Build a deck. No,
No, you couldn't do that either because you're too close to the water.
stop it.
It's got to be too. It has to be a certain. Yeah, no.
It's gonna be so much.
Yep.
That's not helping us.
And then you have to build in the accessibility for that too, and the deck will cost you $50,000, because wood's expensive right now. So it is, I don't know. It is what it is. Any other questions on any of that?
So just to sort
yeah.
of reiterate, if this capital project is not approved by the committee tomorrow, then DPW has to do the paperwork again, and that
Basically, we start-
$5,000 for the permit
Yeah.
again.
And then there's the kind of inflationary cost for delay in the project. It's estimated to do that whole retaining wall, like when we did the other side, over here, we did all this, and then we also had dredged that section of the lake because it was all mucky and whatnot. We don't have to do the dredging here, so we're looking at basically just doing that shoreline piece up top, and then obviously the AD, the accessible pathway coming in from the side, but yeah, it's $100,000 just to do the shoreline piece. So it's going to be at least 105, but could be 120, 130. Again, it just depends on. We would certainly push it for next year, and Dawn would try to find the time to do the work and reapply and hope that it gets approved next year. But it's
But we're running the risk of the $100,000 project in and of itself, aside from permits, aside from extra work for DPW.
and then you're running.
We're running the chance of costs increasing
Yeah,
and labor costs increasing, materials, everything.
and it will.
Uh-huh.
And it will. So it could very well either be, 130, 140, 100, it's hard to say what that number is. And again, it just depends. Is it next year? Is it 2 years? Is it, and then there's the ADA aspect of that and trying to solve that problem that we've been trying to solve. It's better, the other side's better, but there is, so let me back up for a second. So this was not the original design that we had proposed to the state. They made us change it because part of it was we were trying to take those stupid trees out and they wouldn't let us. And so they had to redesign it, and that's what it came to be this. And so again, we're kind of looking to kind of duplicate that other side and solve some of those issues. The original design of what we had when the tree cave was coming out had the accessibility piece built in that first phase, but because we couldn't remove the trees, we lost that piece of it. So we're trying to correct what the state wouldn't let us fix 2 years ago. So, it is what it is. It is a liability.
Isn't there some kind of and I'm this is not my branch of the law. So
Yes.
isn't there something under the ADA where there has to be some form of accessibility if you've got something open to the public? And we now have a beach that is not accessible and hasn't been accessible for a good 5+ years and then some.
Unless they put a fence.
I think, well, I don't know the particulars of that, but my guess is you could argue that because we haven't touched this side of the beach, that, you know,
Because we haven't touched it, it's technically grandfathered in.
yeah.
However, we touched the
So
other
as soon as we
side.
touch this side, you would have to.
Anyone got a shovel?
Well, I'll tell you what happened at our house.
Yeah.
When the courthouse was built, there were 2 trees on our property and they cut them down. Oops.
Yeah.
We didn't want them cut down. They cut them down. Oops. That's all they said. Oops.
Anyway, so let's move on to the other side, which is our recreation revolving fund. And so the revolving fund is basically all the programs we run. Going back to, we've had the revolving fund in place for 8 years now. And our revolving fund basically means all of our programs are entirely self-sufficient. It pays all the salaries, pays all the expenses of those direct programs to run those. Going back to when I got here, now this is year 11 for me, which is a little scary. But going back to when I first got here, we used to have to go to, like, the camp budget, for example, which is our largest program, used to be on the taxpayer side. And what used to happen was in October, I'd put in a budget, say this October of 23, I would put in a budget for camp that would go from July 1st of 24 through June of 25. Now, it was completely a guesstimate of what is salaries going to be a year, 18 months in advance. What are foods costs going to go? What are, that kind of stuff. And so it made it really difficult to budget properly because there's just so many factors that far out in advance with, changing markets. What are you going to charge for camp, And the other problem was that anytime we wanted to start a new program, again, same process. 18 months from now, I want to start a new program. And this is what I think it's going to cost. And can you give me funding? So it would be all on the taxpayer side. They'd approve the budget, and then basically all the money that came in from camp just went back to the taxpayers and kind of reimbursed the taxpayers. What the revolving fund does is it basically almost gives us like our own, I don't want to use bank account because it's not really the right word, but it gives us our own account. But our money comes in and out of our own account. It doesn't, the taxpayers aren't giving us any money to make camp run. And back then when I first got here, we were running 20 programs a year. This past year, we ran 320 different classes. And we were actually at about 300 when COVID hit. And then we lost about 90% of them because of COVID. And it took us about a year and a half to get back up to where we are now. But we talk about even though I don't get any tax dollars to run any of our 320 programs, we talk about it with the council mostly for the benefit of the council, but anybody listening at home so that they understand how that works. So on top of every program that we run, and there's the budget sheets are over here, if you want to pass those around. The town gives me every year they give me what they call a salary allocation. And it's basically like a percentage of costs for HR's time, payroll's time, purchasing's time, so forth. It is this year, that number that they've given me is $60,000. So above and beyond the direct expenses to run camp and all of our after school and all of our other programs, we have to build a budget for these programs that breaks out that $60,000 so that because that money I am basically giving back to the taxpayers. And what we used to do was to take kind of our 6 or 7 largest programs, camp being one of them, and we would divide them just to those 7 different programs to make sure we were covering those costs. So at the time, camp was covering something like 92% of that $60,000. which made it difficult for camp to stay kind of within market rates and within other, just staying competitive because it was a big chunk of change that had to be covered. What I've done this year is a little different than how I've done it in the past, which was I took those 320 programs that we did and I broke all of the programs that we offered out into categories, which I've got here on the screen. And so what we did was percentage of their impact on the budget. So obviously camp is still a big chunk. Camp Natticook and Trackbridge is the top line. So they're going to cover 39,000 of that, 39,517 of that $60,000 is what's being charged off to camp. Our summer stage is a small 1-week theater camp, so theirs is only $500. Our after school program is the next big one, so that's $12,000. But it's basically kind of percent of the whole. And so that, when I build, when we create a new bus trip or a new preschool program or special events like our murder mystery, we build in these costs into the cost of the program when we're developing those, what we need to charge for them. It's a little more fair than charging, 92% of the cost off to just camp. And I can send this to you, Tracy. But then we also look at things like we took over the community garden 2 years ago from the Agriculture Commission that's disbanded. And I can't tell you how much time that takes of me to administer that. It's quite a handful. And so we kind of figured out, okay, what is my cost? And if you look through the budget on the community garden, I budgeted, okay, how many hours a year am I spending on the garden? And it's, 30, 40, 50 hours. I can't remember what the number is offhand. Same with function hall rentals, we're spending a fair amount of time. And right now, because we haven't had, I used to have somebody on staff that would basically just work weekends covering function hall rentals. Well, that person left in September. And so since September, guess who's been covering those? So, like I've got 2 this weekend. I'm here all day Saturday from 11 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night on Saturday because I've got to change over the room between the 2 different, whatever. And so there's a proportion of the time that we're going to charge off to this allocation that we never used to do. So it dilutes the overall costs to everything that we do. And this is a number I can kind of use moving forward, to help cover some of those things. So like I said, Camp Trek in Natticook is $39,000. That's going to need to recoup that cost. Then you look at like after school, and after school is our newest big program, and we're still growing with our program. But Hannah, who runs our after school program, also serves as camp director and also runs like our school vacation weeks. And so one of the things that we do, Hannah's salary and benefits is actually paid out of the revolving fund, not by the taxpayer. So all the FICA and Social Security and all that too is all covered into. And so if you look in those budget sheets for camp, after school, and vacation week, you'll actually see a percentage for labeled camp ASP director benefits. And so it's again broken down even further. So kind of proportionally, okay, after school is going to cover X amount of the benefits plus the salary. We used to only do 2 or 3 bus trips a year, mostly because it was me running a lot of those bus trips. And last year we were able to hire somebody to basically staff bus trips. And, because we got to the point where right after COVID, like everybody wanted to travel. And so like last year from September to January, I think we did 7 trips and all of them sold out within weeks of being posted. And we've been doing trips every 3 or 4 weeks year round ever since. But I've got somebody now on staff, then that's all they do is just, they go on bus trips and they basically chaperone and make sure people get on the bus. And we're doing a whole lot more trips now than we ever used to, which is kind of nice. And then we talked about the garden and the function hall. So does that make sense? Any questions about that? Like I said, this is kind of the presentation in the nutshell. Again, our presentation, and we do the revolving piece mostly out of do I have anything else? No, that's it. mostly for education. I think everybody on council has been there for at least a year, so there shouldn't be anybody new. So the people on the council at least know the process now. So sometimes it's interesting some years when there's 2 or 3 new council members and they've never been through it and they go, well, what's this? And they don't understand but you know, revolving fund allows us to grow and expand because it's kind of like, as long as I can pay for it, I can create any new program, and which is how we've gotten to 320. So that's it on the budget. Let's move on to camp. So summer camp registration opened last Monday, January 8th. And on the first day, we had 892 registrations, single day, which is about 10% higher than what we did on day one last year. At this point, our Natticook regular camp at Camp Natticook is 68% full for the summer. And one of the things that I found kind of interesting last couple of years, like kindergarten, first grade is usually the one that sells out instantly. This year, 4th and 5th grade has sold out. And we're working to kind of expand that a little bit, but versus the kindergarten and first grade hasn't yet. So it's just kind of opposite of what it has been for several years. And some of that is kids just getting older and staying with us, but it's odd. Like I said, especially kindergarten, first grade is usually the one that's like gone instantly. So our teen camp is about 65% full. And again, we're slightly ahead of where we are last year. And then our summer theater camp is about a third full at this point. As of lunchtime today, we had 1,012 total registrations in a week and a half. Last year, we ended the summer with 1,304. So we're 78% of the way of hitting what we did last year already. And we're shooting for like 1,380, somewhere in there. So we're off to a really good start registration wise.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
But didn't you also make a change in the cancellation policy?
We did that too, yes. As we discussed back in the fall, I can't remember when that was, but we talked about, and this is, they used to have to put down a $25 deposit and now it's $50 a week. But that doesn't change the enrollment numbers. So enrollment's actually gone up even with that increase. And we've had some questions about because now it's payments are due 45 days in advance instead of 10. And if you want to cancel or transfer, you got to do it 30 days in advance instead of 10. And we've had a few questions, but otherwise people haven't batted an eye on it. And part of that is we have a good program, and part of that is we're still one of the lower priced camps in the area. So, and we try to do that. So that leads us into staffing. Enrollment numbers are obviously based on what we think we're going to get for staff, and we're starting. They're starting to pick up. Applications are starting to come in now. I think I did 4 today. Processed 4 new hires today. Our biggest challenge, I think, is going to be our camp cook. Kathy, who has been our cook for 14 years, has retired. She's having some health issues, and so she just can't do the job anymore. And unfortunately, she's actually the only employee in Parks and Rec that predates me. So, so that'll be a big loss. But we're looking for obviously a school cafeteria cook type person that wants to work for the summer. So we'll see how that goes. But then beyond that, obviously, lifeguards, camp counselors, paraprofessionals, summer maintenance, archery. So kind of everything's open at this point, and we're just kind of, so if you know anybody that's looking for a summer job, we can hire as young as 16. And positions are kind of open until filled. It usually takes us till, in an ideal world, I used to be able to get this done by by April. The last couple of years, it's been more like early June. So, but I may fill counselor spots by March, but it may be June by the time I get lifeguards, because lifeguards are always tough. But overall, we're in good shape. Anybody interested that's listening at home, you can apply online through the town website, and then we'll reach out after you apply. So we're in good shape there overall. Coming up events, we're working now on the 32nd annual Winter Carnival, which is going to be Saturday, February 24th from 12 to 3 at Wasserman Park. And this is, as we've done in the past, this is a day of kind of free games, crafts, music, kind of the idea is to get people outside and using the outdoors in the winter. You know, it's instead of being kind of stuck inside. So it is entirely outdoors. Hopefully we have good weather. Last year was on the colder side, but you know, usually as long as it's semi-decent, we'll get 1,000, 1,200 people to show up. So right now I've got 22 groups signed up. Usually we're somewhere in the low 30s. So we're going pretty well there. And then the last update, which is just kind of my miscellaneous piece, is the ice skating rink is still closed because it's been 50 degrees for weeks on end. You know, normally we open in early January. It's finally starting to get, it certainly feels like it today, you know. And so I think maybe this weekend there's a potential it could get opened. As long as people stay off the ice until we open it. There's a big giant sign out there in front of the rink that says open versus closed. And if you step on it on the ice when it's closed, then you tend to break through and then it takes longer because now I got to wait for that section to refreeze. But we are getting cold the next 4 or 5 days. Although looking at the long range forecast, we're looking at mid to upper 40s next week. So it could all melt by next week. I don't know. So that's what I got. Questions on any of that?
All right. I do have a question. Has nothing to do with that, but since we're talking about the ice rink and the location of it, how is the construction going on the pathway that's going out to the falls, the Wildcat Falls?
It's proceeding. I haven't had any recent updates. They're basically trying to work through the winter. In some cases, it makes it easier when things are kind of frozen. But yeah, as long as there's not like deep snow, I think they're planning on working the last I heard they're trying to be done by late spring, so like May, June.
Okay.
But we'll see. And then obviously there'll be a big, you know, ceremony and whatnot once it opens, but that's the plan.
Okay. My only question.
Yep.
Does anybody else have any questions? All right. So, Matt, you indicated that you had the report from Rick
Yep.
for MYA.
I do.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to read from his email just because it's easier than trying to read my chicken scratch here. So basketball and wrestling are currently in session. Wrestling hosts its annual tournament at the high school this coming Sunday. Registration for lacrosse is open until January 31st. Registration for soccer starts on February 1st and then runs through March 31st. And registration for softball begins today. Lastly, MYA has collected the 25 signatures it needs for their citizens warrant article to develop the field at Greenfield Farms on Pearson Road. So they are putting in that citizens petition. As you recall, when we talked at the end of the summer, we put in the field project into our budget and they took it out saying, oh, we can't afford it. So MYA is putting in their own citizens warrant article. Basically it goes right to the warrant because they have the required signatures to do so. And then it's up to the taxpayers. It'll be a separate item in the budget and people will be, you vote yay or nay. And it's going to be, I think they said it was 5 cents on the tax rate, I think was the number. But don't quote me on that. But it, it'll affect the tax rate, obviously, if it goes through. So they'll be working, once they get it submitted, they'll be working to do kind of a community education campaign to say, hey, this is why you should support this warrant article. So that'll be, social media. We talked about doing something with Merrimack TV, maybe a show or something about like an education show. On that stuff, and then through the website and whatnot. And then they want to thank Kating, Elbit Systems, and then Public Works for continued support.
All right. Thank you, Rick and Spirit.
Rich and
Appreciate
Spirit.
All right. Let's see. Maureen Hall for
Hi.
the Senior Citizens Club.
I have really nothing to talk about, believe it or not. We haven't had a meeting in 4 weeks because of the holidays. Then we had a snow day and then Martin Luther King. But next Monday, we should be voting on all our officers. And hopefully we have a lot of people that came forward at the last minute. So everything's going great over there.
Nice.
Great. Thank you. All right. Naomi is not here for school board. I believe she's across the walkway.
She is.
Matthew for student rep.
Yeah. So this Saturday, or last Saturday, sorry, select band students participated in the Chamber All-State. Mid-December, the MHS Theater, after a little hiatus, performed A Christmas Carol and Check Please. And then their spring musical will be Mamma Mia. And then some of our sports teams, basketball, hockey, wrestling, as well as unified basketball, have also started.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. Mackenzie for town council is also across the walkway. Yes. So, does anyone else here have any questions or anything they want to discuss or ask about or comment on or anything else?
I guess just an update. So when Nora Campbell came here, she got approval after that meeting with the town council. She got approval last week, or I think the week or before, from the Girl Scouts of New Hampshire. So the theater project will be moving forward, I assume. And just a side note on that, the Merrimack Lions Club donated $500 to help her defray
Nice.
the cost. So hopefully she'll get some more support from the community. So.
That's great. Thank you, Phil. I appreciate that. I know everybody appreciates everything that the Lions Club does for this community. It's pretty amazing. I'm not even 100% sure everybody knows everything that you do, but it's still wonderful to know that we have such a close-knit community with everyone who wants to contribute to it. So thank you. All right, Mrs. Brown, do you have anything you'd like to add? Okay, just thought we'd ask. All right. So we have future meeting is February 21st. One after that is March 20th. Don't forget this year is a leap year, so don't even fix your calendars because it's all messed up. And if there's nothing else, I know we don't have a quorum, but we can still vote on whether to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Thanks, Josh. Anyone want a second? Great. All in favor? Yay. And the meeting ends at 1945. 7:45.